Okay, if you want some extra practice with cladograms and phylogenetic trees, here you go. Let's look at number 1. It's referring to this cladogram or phylogenetic tree above. Which of the following is an accurate statement of relationships? Well, the way you do these is you have to look at each one of the answer choices and determine if it's true, and in this case is the accurate statement of the relationship. So if you want to do this on your own and then check your answers, pause your video now. Okay, let's look at A. A green alga is more closely related to a red alga than a moss. So green alga and moss. Let's look at how many ancestors they share. Green alga and moss, remember we can't go past the green alga, so we have to start here. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we've got 4 common ancestors. Here's the most recent common ancestor. Green alga is more closely related to a moss than a red algae. Okay, well, we've said that, we've looked at the green alga and the moss. Let's look at the green alga and the red alga. Sorry, kind of going backwards. So, related to the red alga, we have to start here. We can't go beyond the red alga because here is the most recent common ancestor between the green alga and the red alga. So we've got 1, 2, 3. So we've got 3 ancestors for the green alga and the red alga, and 4 for the green alga and the moss. So green alga more closely related to the red. Ooh, that's not correct. Okay, let's look at B. Green alga is more closely related to the moss. Well, we saw that because they have 4 common ancestors. We like that answer, but let's check the other 2. Remember, in a course test, you really need to be careful. Look at all the choices. You might find one that is even better. Green alga is equally related to the red alga and the moss. No, we saw that their green alga and the moss had 4 common ancestors, 3 for the red alga and the green moss. So we know it's not that one. Green alga is related to red alga but not related to moss. No, doesn't make sense. So the answer indeed is B. All right, let's look at number 2. Have another cladogram. So here's the cladogram or the phylogenetic tree that goes with number 2. If you want to do this on your own, pause the video now. Okay, by reference of the tree above, which of the following is an accurate statement of relationships? Once again, make sure that you are looking at every answer choice. Crocodile is more closely related to a lizard than to a bird. So crocodile and lizard, how many common ancestors? Well, we have to start here, 1, 2. How many common ancestors to a bird? Crocodile and bird, we have to start here because here's a common ancestor of dinosaur and bird, but it's not a common ancestor of the crocodile. It comes after the crocodile. So crocodile and bird, we've got 1, 2, 3 common ancestors. So the crocodile is not more closely related to the lizard than it is the bird. It's not that one. B, crocodile is more closely related to the bird than the lizard. We just saw that, but let's look and see if there are some that are even more closely related. Crocodile is equally related to the lizard and the bird. Nope. Crocodile is related to a lizard, but not the bird. No, that doesn't make sense. The answer is B. All right. Let's look at number 3. And let me cover up this picture. All right, here's the cladogram that goes with number 3. So if you want to do this question on your own, pause the video. Okay, now this one may be a little bit more difficult to understand. These cladogram questions I give to my AP Biology class, and probably not as simplistic as what we've been doing so far. And in fact, the last one that we did on the previous quiz probably should have been answered like this. And this is going to be the difference between the end of course test and an AP test. Let's look at number 3. Which of the following is an accurate statement of relationship? A seal is more closely related to a horse than a whale. Seal and a horse, they have 1, 2 common ancestors. The whale and the seal, 1, 2 common ancestors. Now let's move on. A seal is more closely related to a whale than a horse. Well, we said they both had two. C, a seal is equally related to a horse and a whale. A seal is related to a whale, but not the horse. Well, we know it's not that because all of these organisms are related. They share this common ancestor here. The answer is C. A seal is equally related to a horse and a whale. Why? Because the seal and the horse and the seal and the whale both share two common ancestors. So actually, this question is more accurate way to look at the relationships when you're looking at just how many common ancestors they share. If they share the same number of common ancestors, they're equally related. And remember in the previous quiz, let's see if I can pull that back up. In the previous quiz, said which two organisms the least related? Well, when we were looking at this cladogram, the chimpanzee and the salmon, we said the chimpanzee is farther out than the hamster and the salmon. So that's why this was chosen. This was from USA test prep question. So I think on the end of course test, you would probably see something more like this. Now, if the answer choices had been they are equally related, then yes, you would have to choose that. So that's the difference between end of course test and an AP test. All right, so let's look at number 4. Which of the 5 marks in the tree above corresponds to the most recent common ancestor of a mushroom and a sponge? If you want to answer this on your own, pause the video. Okay, here's the mushroom and the sponge. Where is their most recent common ancestor? Is E a common ancestor of the sponge? Yes, it is. Is it a common ancestor of the mushroom? No, it's not. Okay, A is a common ancestor of the mushroom, but not the sponge. Answer is D. The sponge and the mushroom, you have to go backward from both of them to find where they have a common ancestor. So the answer is D. Number 9. So if you want to do number 9 on your own, go ahead and pause the video now. All right. Based on the above tree, assume that the ancestors had, and I've already written it down here, long tail, ear flaps, external testes, and fixed claws. Based on the tree and assuming that all evolutionary changes in these traits are shown, what traits does a sea lion have? So remember, if we want to see what traits a sea lion has, we go backward. All right. So long tail, sea lion. We have a long tail of the ancestor, but look, on the road pathway to sea lion, short tail. Can't be that one. B, short tail, yes. No ear flaps. Well, there's ear flaps down here. Short tail, abdominal, testes. Loss of ear flaps here. That would be for the seal, but not the sea lion. So the sea lion still has ear flaps. So can't be that one. Look at C, short tail, yes. No ear flaps. No, we've already said. No, it does have ear flaps. Ear flaps down here, and on the path to sea lion, we don't have the loss of those ear flaps. That happened to the seal. Okay, let's look at D. Short tail, yes. Ear flaps, we've said yes because they did not lose their ear flaps. Abdominal testes, yes. Fixed claws. Well, I see nothing about fixed claws. Oh, yeah, it was down here. Fixed claws, yes. D looks like the answer, but let's look at E. Long tail, okay, so the answer has to be D. Let's look at number 10. If you want to do it on your own, pause the video now. In the above tree, assume that the ancestor was an herb. So let's write that down here. Was an herb, not a tree, without leaves or seeds. So without leaves, seeds. Based on the tree and assuming that all evolutionary changes in these traits are shown, which of the tips has a tree habit and lacks true leaves? Let's look at A. Lepidodendron. So let's find it. It's right here. Okay. Which has a tree habit. Ooh, Yeah, lepidodendron tree lacks true leaves. Here's true leaves. It came about after the lepidodendron. So the lepidodendron obviously does not have true leaves. So that one looks good. Let's check the others. Club moss, it's not a tree. It's still an herb because the tree characteristic was after the club moss, so it can't be that. Oak, well, oak, true leaves. Celotum, way over here. We've got the loss of leaves. Again, true leaves, and then they lost their leaves, but nothing about a tree. Okay. Fern has the true leaves, so it can't be that one. Okay, so the answer is A, lepidodendron. That one that's a little bit more difficult. Number 6. Which of the trees below is false, given the larger phylogeny above? Okay, so this one's a little bit more difficult, but just look for patterns. So if you want to do this on your own, pause the video now. All right, anytime I look at a phylogenetic tree or a cladogram like this, I'm struck by the ones that are very close together, branching off. They share a very recent common ancestor. There's a speciation event that led to pines and lilies. So a fern is closely related to the lily and the pine, but the lily and the pine share a more recent common ancestor. But we've got, look at this, green algae, but fern, lily, and pine together. Look at this, yeast and human. Yeast are more closely related to humans than they are plants. Okay, because here's their more recent common ancestor. Where's the most recent common ancestor of yeast and plants? Well, way back here. Okay, so the yeast and the human more closely related. Giardias, little protists, the bacteria, kind of off on their own. So take a look. The answer to this question is D. And the reason is, look at the yeast here. Here, the yeast is very closely related to the lily. And as we can see up here, it was not. This is showing yeast more closely related to humans than they are plants. And this shows yeast closely related to the plant. Let's look here. We don't have, we do have the yeast and the human close together, separate from the plants. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Here we don't have the yeast shown here. We've got the human, we've got pine, lily, and fern. So this one might be a little bit more confusing, but definitely when you see this one, you see that in this one, the yeast and the lily really should not be that closely related. So the answer to that one is D. We have time for number 8. This one also is a dandy. Which of the 4 trees above depicts a different pattern of relationships than the others? And if you're good at visual relationships, spatial relationships, you'll probably be good at questions like these. If you want to answer this on your own, go ahead and pause the video now. Okay, the answer to number 8 is A. The reason is, look at A. We've got, G and A, you're seeing those together, G and A together here, G and A together here, G and A together here. So that's, remember I told you I look for ones that are branching off together. All right. Look here, this is where you're going to see something different about A than these others. So let's look at C, E, D, and B. Okay, here, here, and here. Notice in these 3, C kind of branches off by itself. E, D, and B huddled together. C branched off by itself. E, D, and B huddled together. C branched off by itself. B, D, and E huddled together. But here, C has joined that huddle with E, D, and B. So this one is the one that shows a different pattern of relationships than the others. And that's all we have time for. Hope you enjoyed those.